2020 was a bit of a wash. So while everything in the world was on fire, video games were sitting pretty. This was a record year for the games industry on every single front. Hardware, software, and most importantly, awareness. Millions and millions of people this year either started playing games or were reintroduced to them. And a year that kept so many people apart, video games actually did the opposite and brought us together. Things like Among Us were great ways to have a social outing without actually going out. Even I was having virtual happy hours with coworkers in Animal Crossing. None of this felt like it would have been possible a year ago, but with people forced to discover new hobbies, gaming was the first thing they turned to. I'm hoping that coming out of all the bullshit everyone has had to deal with over the last year, at least more people will find the common ground of video games, and we get to welcome more and more people into the hobby we all love. And this was the perfect year for our hobby, because I'll tell you what, we had a year. This year was stuffed full of games, so naturally, I missed a couple of the big boys. Those big boys being The Last of Us 2 and Hades. I'll be honest, I don't really care about The Last of Us 2. I just don't. I really liked the first one, which is capped off with one of the best video game endings. I remember audibly watching it and saying to my TV, please end here, please end here, please end here, and then it ends. It was just perfect. I just don't have a huge fondness for the Last of Us series, I guess. I mean, the first one wasn't even the best game of this year. Maybe I'll get around to The Last of Us 2, but I'm not really in any type of rush. Whereas with Hades, I cannot wait to jump into this game. Supergiant already won me over with Bastion, so seeing the reception of Hades has been an incredibly wholesome moment for a company that deserves it. This guy's at the top of my 2021 backlog. Now let's talk games I actually did play.
We will send unto them only you. Rip and tear until it is done.
Get a load of this fucking game. Doom Eternal was one of my biggest surprises for me in 2020. For some reason, I just couldn't get into Doom 2016. I remember after about 2 hours, I put it down and just never went back. Now, Doom Eternal, on the other hand, shot me out like a goddamn cannon. I think what makes this game so good is the movement in Doom Eternal is so perfect. For lack of better wording, it works exactly how you would expect it to and how you want it to. Compile that with a game design that rewards aggression and penalizes cowering like a little bitch. You got a good game. For you roguelike fans, we had Monster Train and Risk of Rain 2 coming at you. This was the first year I really dove into the roguelike genre, and there's just no going back for me. I think this genre is so impressive because it requires a perfect balance between in-game progression and just getting good. That balance is super delicate too, and the minute a roguelike leans a little bit too far into one of those, the game can just fall flat on its face. I also really like that these two games are on opposite ends of the roguelike spectrum. Monster Train is much more of a single-player deck-building experience that makes you slow down and really plan out and calculate your moves. Then you have Risk of Rain 2. This guy just got bumped out of early access back in August. It's just you and a few friends, you jump in, start moving, and then just never stop moving. Then next thing you know, you're like 100 items deep, there's shit all over your screen, and the soundtrack is just melting your face off. All while you're just sitting there thinking, yep, I think this is the peak of games. Persona 4 Golden finally got released from Vita Prison, and some very smart dude reviewed it. Nintendo charged $60 for Mario 64 at 720p and without widescreen support, so naturally I bought it like a jackass. We got a turn-based strategy game set in the Gears universe that just made me want to play Fire Emblem Three Houses for the 4th time. Then you have Fall Guys, which is probably the game that made me laugh the hardest this year. I think the beauty of Fall Guys is while there's a slightly competitive game to it, it does a great job of making you feel like an idiot for just taking it too seriously. I think it's also just impossible to get mad when you agree with this song after each elimination. Oddly enough, this kind of became my ultimate decompression game. I would turn it on just to relieve the stress of the day and have some good laughs. Then you have the complete opposite of that with Call of Duty Warzone. This fucking game. I've never had a game give me stronger emotions than Warzone does. This game can be such a fucking mess. Sometimes my gun is a transformer. Sometimes my watch shows through a wall. Sometimes bounties cause the game to crash. Sometimes you have hackers. Sometimes you have guys in the lobby spawning 3 juggernauts at the same time. Sometimes you have hackers. Sometimes you have people infinitely healing themselves in the gas. Sometimes you have hackers. Underneath all of that though, there's a reason I spent literally hundreds of hours playing this game this year, because it is far and away the best battle royale on the market, and it is not even close. Warzone does 2 things perfectly. Ensure I don't spend 20 minutes watching my friends play when I get eliminated, and they do this through a brilliantly balanced res system. And then second, they promote aggressive play, which they do by dropping your loadout 7 minutes into the game so you can get your desired guns, just so I don't spend 30 minutes looting and picking up attachments to inevitably get killed by a sniper. Every second of this game game, you are actively trying to seek out a fight, because the gunplay and moment-to-moment action just hits so good. Love it or hate it, which I do both, you can't deny that Warzone is easily the best multiplayer game this year, and one of just the best overall. Lastly, for my honorable mentions, you have Animal Crossing. Holy shit, did we need this game. I still don't really understand the secret sauce of this game, but somehow I managed to spend hours each day catching fish, chopping down trees, collecting seashells, and just talking to my adorable animal neighbors. What made Animal Crossing so successful is it knows how to deliver a wholesome and, more importantly, widely accessible experience. Like I said earlier, I was meeting up with people from work on Animal Crossing for happy hours, and we literally would just sit around on each other's islands, exchange gifts, and talk turnip presses. My biggest issue with this game is the endgame got a little bit too overwhelming for me. Once I created and finished all my terraforming projects, it felt a little bit too much like a chore to just continue iterating on my island. And that's okay. That doesn't make Animal Crossing any less special to me. Animal Crossing provides these perpetual feelings of joy and comfort every single time I log in. And no matter how long I spend away, I'll always be welcome back to my little piece of paradise. All right, let's get to it. The top 5 games of 2020. Okay, let's get this out of the way. CDPR made this game under crunch-like conditions, delivered an inexcusable product on base consoles, and the marketing completely oversold the scope of this game. So we good to go going forward? Just wanted to make sure we knocked out all the basic criticisms. Cyberpunk. I've never had a game cause me so much inner turmoil. Even as I'm writing this script and subsequently saying these words, I'm still going back and forth whether this or Animal Crossing is my number 5. Cyberpunk has to be one of the most frustrating games I've played in a long time. Not just because of the bugs, but because of its wasted potential. You can see that CDPR laid the groundwork for what could have been a generation-defining game, but just couldn't really push it across the finish line. My biggest issue wasn't with the bugs, it was with the amount of content in the game. You have this huge, badass open world, but there really isn't a lot to do in it. You have these gigs that you kind of mindlessly do, and these random crimes that you go and resolve, and they all just feel the same. You sneak for 4 minutes until someone randomly sees you, and then you pull out a shotgun and finish the mission. You then spend the next few minutes fumbling through the clunky UI, looking at the loot you gathered, just so you can inevitably scrap it or sell it. That's the extent of the content you get outside the main story and side quests, which are superb, by the way. But there's no barbershops, no hangout spots, no car customization, no purchasable apartments, no NPC AI. These are things that CDPR could have done to really make this city feel alive, because Night City deserves that treatment. I'll say the open world of Night City is maybe my favorite I've experienced in a game. Visually, there's so much going on. Signs are blasting into your corneas. You have sounds coming from every single direction. And that's all kind of coupled with this super sleek Neo-Tokyo vibe. It has these huge, vibrant vistas across the map that are strategically placed for backdrops to big story moments. Those moments are the best part of Cyberpunk. These intimate, character-driven scenes and story beats. Every character is compelling in their own way, with very distinct personalities. Add in the top-notch facial animations and voice acting, and the characters became my favorite part of this game. I think that's why I was frustrated there wasn't more I could do, specifically with these characters, kind of those GTA 4 style hangouts. I want to go bowling with Pan Am, play darts with Judy, go out to a bar with River, but I can't. The truth is, Cyberpunk 2077 has some incredibly high highs and some dog shit lows. This interaction with Misty is the perfect example of what I mean by that. I mean, look how good the lighting looks here and Misty's facial animations, and then I ask her to flip some tarot cards, and this happens. I mean, come on. And that right there is the issue with Cyberpunk. Every single time you have something that's great that happens in that game, it finds a way to pull you out of it. Underneath all the memes, the crunch, the politics, the bugs, there's a really great game here. There's a game with soul, beautiful environments, incredible characters, and a stellar story. What I really hope for is that with time, CDPR can deliver the experience that they intended Cyberpunk to be. And that's why it comes in at my number 5. Or maybe Animal Crossing. I don't know. Ghost of Tsushima is the exact polar opposite of Cyberpunk in terms of an open world. Ghost is much more about you being completely alone with this world and kind of in solitude, and Sucker Punch knows this, so they make some great decisions in minimizing your UI and really promoting immersion. They get rid of all the clutter and bullshit most open worlds have and decide to make it all contextual. Your waypoint guide is wind that flows through the grass. Instead of having the typical exclamation points and question marks for points of interest, this little bird over here swings in and guides you whenever something is close by. And that's not the only spot where Ghost shows off its incredible presentation. It also pays homage to old samurai films. Incredibly cinematic mission starts and end screens. Your grainy black and white Kurosawa mode, these badass shots and settings for each incoming duel, showing off the vistas and environments while you're sitting there writing haikus. Like, holy hell, someone went to film school. This game's presentation is top notch and does a phenomenal job of making sure exploring feels less like a chore and more like an actual adventure. I think I maybe fast traveled 6 times over my entire playthrough, and while the presentation was part of the reason why, it was mainly due to this. Ghost of Tsushima is the most beautiful world I've ever seen in a game, and that is not hyperbole. I remember I would turn the game off and just think about if there's any other game that could even compete with this game, and I just couldn't. Maybe like a Red Dead 2 or a Forza, but even then I feel like I'm probably reaching. The world is so sprawling and colorful with these views and horizons that would just yank the breath right out of you. As for the gameplay loop, this game is very much your typical sword fighting / stealth game. It's built a lot off of countering your strong and weak attacks, and then they put a little bit more spice in it in the form of stances, where you're actively changing different fighting stances to be more effective against certain varieties of enemies. When all of this clicks, it's super satisfying, and the sword fighting flows really well, as compared to the stealth combat, which is just a little bit lacking to me, mainly due to the fact that the AI is just straight up dumb when it comes to stealth situations. All of these aspects are wrapped up and presented in a phenomenal story of historical fiction, one that ensures it honors the tradition and aesthetic of feudal Japan. Ghost of Tsushima has a lot of things going for it. Great gameplay, beautiful world, compelling story, and most importantly, my number 4. What do these 4 things have in common? They all have flow. That flowing movement is the crowning achievement of Ori and Will of the Wisps, and why it comes in at number 3. Now I could dwell on this game's visuals and art style, but if you've seen 5 seconds of game footage of Will of the Wisps, I don't think I really need to convince you. But what did surprise me is the traversal and combat in this game are so incredibly fine-tuned and precise. I never felt like a death was cheap or the game's fault. It was always my fault. Every single bulb, enemy, piece of the environment is so receptive to Ori, and that once you start moving, you can just start gliding through entire sections without touching the ground. And as you progress, you're picking up more and more things that slowly lend itself to the flow of Ori. I remember when I reached the peak of progression, I was completely stunned by what I was able to do and how well I was able to do it. I love a game that really pushes you to be the best player you can be, and Ori ensures that you can't just sleepwalk through it. At any point, it requires you to have an incredibly active gameplay experience, but goddamn is it rewarding. Okay, look, I know I said I wouldn't dwell on the visuals of this game, but holy shit is the art direction just incredible. Running at 4K 120 FPS, this game is just a treat to play. I genuinely feel like Xbox should have touted this as the technical showpiece for the Series X, instead of shelling out for third-party bullshit like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which I'm sure is a good game in its own right, but look at this. Why not put one of your first-party studios front and center? And especially when you have no other first-party games to show. I guess all of this just to say, the style and overall feel of this game are just the best. That beautiful watercolor-like art style in tandem with an incredibly moving soundtrack. A soundtrack that seems to constantly be crescendoing to a climax, which in turn makes everything you're doing feel so significant and grandiose. Ori and the Will of the Wisp wasn't a game I thought would be in my top 5 this year, much less top 3. But after 20 hours with it, I have to say, this piece of art is truly something special. Okay, fine, it's true. Persona 5 is my favorite game of all time. Okay? Are we happy? So are we really that shocked that Persona 5 Royal came in at number 2? Or are we more shocked that it isn't number 1? This one was a pretty tough spot for me. Persona 5 Royal is one of the most phenomenal experiences in gaming, and it's not just me who thinks that. It was the highest scored game on Metacritic in 2020. They took all the things that made Persona 5 great and just cranked them up to 11. Streamlining processes, adding in badass new music, making dungeon crawling more engaging, fleshing out characters even further than it had in its 100-hour-long predecessor. But the sticking point here is this is still the same game for the first 60-ish hours. Sure, there are things added in here and there, but it really felt like the same experience than Persona 5. Then you move into the extra content, which provides an incredibly well-crafted, complex antagonist that does a good job of making you sit and think, what would I do in this situation? But I have 2 big issues with this game. One, your new squad mate. She just doesn't feel organic in the context of the early story. And maybe this is because I played Persona 5 so much, but I just can't shake that she feels so out of place in some spots. And this feels like Atlus's way of just saying, hey, remember the girl who's literally the biggest person on the cover art? Here she is! Here she is! Second is the ending. I think the ending of Persona 5 Royal is incredible and probably one of the better endings in a game out there, but just, Persona 5's ending is in a league of its own. And maybe this is just like the first part. Maybe this is a personal thing. The ending of Persona 5 means so much to me, so I feel like no matter what, nothing would really be able to beat it, but it's just hard to describe. I wanted more out of Royal. I dive a little deeper, but then obviously we kind of sneak into big spoiler territory. I'm sure you're probably watching this thinking like, bro, he hates this game. Well, hold on. There's a reason this motherfucker was number 2. This game is so damn sexy. Persona 5 Royal is the RPG standard. Not just the JRPG standard, the RPG standard. This is from a gameplay perspective. This game just does it all. It's perfectly cohesive systems, it's incredibly rewarding combat, and it's perfectly fine-tuned balanced gameplay loop. It's really insane how this game is tuned so well that you progress character relationships and social stats at literally the last possible moment. Every part of this game has something to do. There's never a moment that's wasted. You're always frantically looking around for activities you can do to benefit your progression. You're acting like a crazy person, planning out every single day and time slot and what you should be doing in all of those moments. I remember I would go to bed every night just think about all the things I had to do in Persona whenever I played the next day. On top of all of this, you're playing with this game that's accompanied by the best video game soundtrack of all time. There are 2 bad songs in this game. 2 out of 129. And the way the soundtrack of this game just, you know what? You're just gonna have to hear it for yourself. DJ, yeah, just play us out with a banger.
I believe we can fly up in the sky. One day we may just be able to touch down on the star. On the road we have to go. The road is fast, we shall proceed until the end of the road. There's no turning back for us, 'cause we will
FF7 does everything right, and not only does it do it right, it does it with a ridiculous amount of polish. This game is just so, like, smooth. Like, look at how Tifa grabs Cloud here, just so sleek and swaggy, and that's how every bit of this game feels for me. Everything in this game just hits so right. I mean, before you even touch the controller, this game proves it knows what it's doing. Cloud jumps off this train right as the bombing mission song hits its swell.
Get down here, Merc.
And this isn't restricted just to this part. All through the game, you're given these badass music cues right as the battle cuts in, and then it ebbs and flows depending where you are in combat. Then each character has their own theme with multiple iterations. Whew. Like, Square Enix didn't have to do this, but they did. And that doesn't go just for the music. Square put so much love and care into this game because they understand how much it means to an entire generation of gamers. And the dirty little secret here is, I'm not one of those gamers. Really, my only experience with Final Fantasy VII was watching over friends' shoulders at their house when I was probably about a 6-year-old kid. I can only imagine the feelings this game gives to people who have such a deep-seated love and nostalgia for this game. I think what really hammers home that love and care is the characters in the game. game. It's really difficult to put into words what makes these characters so good. They're all just so charming and likable, each in their own way. I just can't get enough of them. And these personalities somehow just fit flawlessly into the beautiful character design in FF7. Like when I first saw Aerith, I just knew she was going to have this snarky but kind of wholesome, bubbly personality. Within 5 lines dialogue,
Oh, I'm sure you are. So?
she proved me right. And while they're written and designed incredibly well, FF7 takes it a step further and gives them phenomenal facial animations and mannerisms. Sure, sometimes they can be a little over the top and anime-y and cheesy at times, but that just kind of adds to the charm for me. What's great is their personalities really carry over into combat. Everyone moves and plays exactly how you would expect. Barret, just being no bullshit type of guy, stands there and fires away. No fancy moves, no nothing. Then you have carefree Aerith kind of bouncing around and dancing and dishing out quips in this little sing-song voice. And this leads into my favorite part of FF7, the combat. Woo! The combat in this game is so satisfying and honestly incredibly gorgeous. You're actively switching between characters, churning out commands while frantically trying to build your ATB bar, and then slowing it all down to make the correct and calculated decision. So it's active combat switched in with turn-based. It's kind of cool. I really like the compromise they did over at Square to make sure it was honoring its roots, but also still not afraid to take the risk of doing something new. The way your characters perform their attacks are the most satisfying I've seen in the game. This is the first time in my adult life where I caught myself pushing buttons harder because I, honest to God, believe they would do more damage that way. Like Cloud's overhead swing. I think that move single-handedly wore down my poor Square button. While these combat elements can sometimes make the game feel a little bit on the easier side, when you crank this puppy up the hard, that's when it feels great. Final Fantasy VII Remake isn't perfect. The dialogue can be choppy, the camera can be funky, the side quests can be a chore, but that flat out just doesn't matter to me. The presentation and moments of this game are just unmatched. There aren't a lot of moments that pop out to me because every bit of this game is as enjoyable as the next. Final Fantasy VII Remake really reminded me of the power of video games, and in a year where intimate experiences were probably lacking for a whole lot of us, this game was there to give you a little bit of comfort, if even for a couple of hours a day. That's why Final Fantasy VII Remake is my 2020 Game of the Year.